Hello everybody. Today's gonna be a bit of a weird video. At least I think it'd be a bit of a weird video. Basically, I'm gonna try to do some doodles and do something else that I probably should have done as the first video for Tales of Rhazie. I'm literally gonna go back and make this an entire playlist for Rainbows of Tales of Rhazie. I don't know if I'm gonna just abandon that 4.5 hour video clip or cut that into pieces and slowly release that, or watch it, take notes of it, and revise it. I don't know which. But I realized something when I started to try to do a video as I was doodling this. A dog. I don't really draw dogs that often. I'm more of a cat person, personally. And it shows that I really do like cats because I do mostly just draw cats. I'm also, fun fact, if my art style changes or looks a bit weird or more rough than it normally does, it's because I'm using a tablet now, and it's something to get used to. But timeline. Why am I stating timeline? Because simply stated, it's a whole big thing. Like, how do I say this? Basically, book one, Tainted Sunrise, is gonna go. I can't even write it. Oh my god, ugh. I need to redo also the cover because I don't like it. But granted, it was a good first attempt for the cover. Basically, how do I say this? What happened for third draft was I was gonna repeat the process and start with Black Dawn. I will get into the warnings after I go over this little backstory, I promise. Because yes, the usual warnings do apply when speaking of Tales of Rhazie or Black Dawn series in general, because mature content happens. This isn't. This is. I don't know how to say this. Yes, there's graphic violence and all, but there's some more adult themes in there. Like, I don't get explicit, I draw the line at fluff. Violence, though, I might get graphic. That's how I've always felt for my writing in general. But as I was going for more backstory, because I can't talk in a straight line apparently. I the plan was Black Dawn will be the starting point once again. And then I was doing this. Yes, prequel one shots. Basically what was happening was earlier this year, I mentioned it on my DeviantArt and I think on my Wattpad when I was attempting and failing at doing monthly updates, that I was writing prequel one shots in order of a series of events. And I was enjoying it greatly until I got to Minx. And then I hit a wall of like, oh shit, I actually need to come up with his mate. Because, fun fact, one of the changes is Mink. I don't know why I'm drawing it like this. But Mink, he gets a mate. I just drew a Molly's head. Mink's a Tom. Tom. Molly. But basically, how to say this? I started from, um, I don't know how many people have actually read my, read my written works, but I started with Mute Trauma, which is when Kabuto destroyed, not so much destroyed, but broke the Shadow Forest. I started from there, made my way down up to that point. Some things happened that were not planned, but I was realizing I was really enjoying writing the backstory stuff, and I was on the fence for a good bit on how far back I wanted to go. Did I want to go a little bit further? Did I want to go back to the founding? Or did I want to go back to the meteor? And then I realized I didn't want to go all the way back to the meteor. The meteor's part of the prologue. That's what matters. But because the thing is, Tales of Rhazie, the main series does not deal with a meteor. It's just that's just lore that the characters don't even know about. But it's the lore of why some things are able to be done the way they are. Because eventually I'm gonna be writing a side story. I don't know when. It might be short, it might be long, but it's gonna deal with the guardians of the meteors per se, those who worship it and its power that have been blessed to them. And it's gonna get into the whole thing with the dogs, because yes, there is a whole thing with the dogs. Hence why I need to draw a dog. And then I started, when I was last trying to attempt to do this, was debating, should I actually make it a curly tail? How do I do curly tail instead of this? Fun fact, big reason why I usually am like, I want long tail is I don't like drawing legs or feet, so I use the tail to cover it up. But I've gotten better. Granted, all that progress might need some work, or at least reworks. But yeah, basically, how do I say this? Because I want to go over the timeline. We start with a random ass meteor crashing upon Rhazie. Actually, no, I should do. I should actually show you guys the prologue. Preview to page 6, which is I literally just need to draw the meteor for this one spot, cliff, the upper part of the meteor and the glow, and then literally just the outline of a slope going down to the meteor, the indent per se. Let's actually go back to page 1 real quick. As we say this in this beautiful prologue, the prologue starts with basically stating about the planet, where I also go over the lore of, hey, spring only lasts 3 moons and the rest of the seasons last 5, where the sun and moon are ringed, and the meteor does bring change. And the whole entire prologue is going over that change, and the blessed one right here, who does not have a canon eye color before the meteor, because there's no point. Because technically speaking, before the meteor crashed, all the animals could only see in grayscale. And quick minor fun fact, the blessed one, she actually I think I have her reference sheet done. Where is it? Spoiler, I was redesigning reference sheets of some of the older ones. Where is it? I might turn her off. Because I was working in reference sheets before I had to change devices and all that before tablets. So this is something I need to get back into as well as the comic. I just want to show off characters real quick. Some of these characters I actually, technically speaking, don't even need for a good while, simply because the blessed one. As you see, spoiler alert for her eye color, her future eye color at least, her original eye color is unknown. Apparently, she could commune with it, is what I put for lore, and some cats claim to see her spirit before calamity strikes, because I wanted a lore piece that I may or may not use in Tales of Rhazie. It might be more of for the Tales of the Meteor and the things. Quick fun fact for her eye color: heterochromia. To make it more clear, it's literally just around her pupil and then 2 lines. But her original eye color is not known. But the whole story starts with this Molly wandering around her homeland, her ancestral home, and then finding the meteor, touching it, and then she was gifted an ability that is unknown. And all the cats in the world, all these felines, I forget what I called them. I think it's the Redene Felidae is what I said was, even though the genius name is wrong, because I just know Felidae is easier for cats, but there's a more specific name it should have been, but I wasn't double checking my stuff when I named it. But she touched the meteor and put things into motion. And then either her or one of her descendants found a random little puppy. And the puppy became part of the family. The puppy also grew and decided to protect its given family that had been given to it. And the dog started protecting the smaller felines against other predators, other cats, hunting for them, and these cats blessed these dogs to be able to speak the tongue of cat, for one, but more importantly, the bigger part of the lore and what is the dog's blessing is they can track ancestors. Basically, they'll look at a cat and be like, and they'll just instinctively know and be able to picture which cat is related to who when staring at them. So, let's say they see a patrol let's say they see Hazel and her kits. They can tell those are her kits just by looking at them. If they looked at Ruby and Shatter Knight, they might get an error because Shatter Knight is a reincarnation, but for a moment, and then they'll realize common ancestor is Alice, the founder of the Shadow Forest, is what the dog's blessing is. It's the ability to know whose kin is whom. Even if they can't always bring the name to mind, they can picture the cat and just tell that they're kin. Upon this, things spread and occasionally a guardian would appear. Guardians have a tendency to have purple eyes, but we're not guaranteed it. So right then and there, that's the only time purple eyes exist outside of the blessed one is when someone has a power that is seen as unnatural. The one ability that is seen as both natural and unnatural is fire. Just so you're all aware. And how do I say this? From there, we go to where is what's labeled as the Rhazie crater. I need to make a map. Maybe if one of the next videos will be actually a map, me attempting to make a map for this place, this fictional world. But in the Rhazie crater, there was at one time quote unquote kingdoms of cats. And this is where we get into spoiler territory. And warning, I might start going into mature content, like murder, genocide, I guess reincarnation, because that's what's going to be happening. And mentions of SA. And I will put what SA is on here because I'm not going to say it just be safe against YouTube. But it's basically all faults of Duke. But every time I say SA, it's this. It's better than saying the other word, which is this. But basically, we get into Duke's era. That's the first actually chapter we're gonna have in Tales of Rhazie. I don't know if I'm gonna split it into multiple chapters. I don't know how in depth at this point in time, even though it's literally what the next chapter I need to write. Because I want to finish up Character Desires, which I haven't done yet. So once that's done, I'll be writing this part of the timeline, which is the era of Duke. Duke was born with a single brother named Shiro. I'm trying to remember what I think, if I remember correctly, I named Duke's original name is Kuro because it means black, so black and white, just for funsies. It's unknown if they had any other kin. They're the only thing that both of them are the only two that are relevant to this part of the timeline. Basically, Duke was Duke was the firstborn, and Shiro was the secondborn. Shiro's ability came forth earlier because he was not a guardian. His ability was lightning. So yes, he could smite somebody. And then Duke eventually found his ability when some random cat, potentially an assassin, who was jealous or something, or someone that just simply pissed him off, attempted to kill Duke. Duke killed him and was able to steal his soul, thus tainting his ability. Because I'm not going to say it right here, but Duke's ability is beyond just stealing the soul of somebody when killing them. Also, quick minor spoiler, if a cat's already dead and his spirit interacts with him, he can't steal their soul for life force. He didn't kill them, so he doesn't get their life force when absorbing them. He just destroys them by killing their spirit. But basically, eventually, Duke's fur. Actually, I'm gonna see if I can find Duke's old reference sheet. Give me a second. I will find it. Wow, it was the correct one. I'm amazing. I did not realize I had it on the correct one. Basically, sorry, I'm using my mouse. He looked like this as a baby. He's his black markings was white, And he stayed like that until he started becoming murdering kids when he was a juvenile. And I'm gonna say this here and now, because you can see it from here. These are his kitten eye colors. He did not have heterochromia when he was a kitten. Well, he had pure heterochromia, not the one we see in the other spot. We can't spot the pure heterochromia, but he had pure heterochromia, which is both sides. And then when he started murdering cats, he gained an extra heterochromia, which is, I believe, central. That should be central heterochromia on top of it. But also, his markings turned quote unquote black. I'm calling them black, even though they're probably just dark gray. Well, technically speaking, this does look black. But as you see, his markings did change as he grew and started killing cats. And the cats noticed the change, and they knew something was wrong about it because he wasn't a chocolate, so his pout wouldn't change that way. Like, sir, some cats did have markings that darkened or lightened up as they got older, but white turning to that color, that's unheard of. It's only if it was the reverse, it was not. The reverse is not unheard of because vitiligo, I'm probably pronouncing that 100% wrong, has shown up occasionally, which is basically the loss of pigment, so the fur will be turning white. And maybe someone actually witnessed it happening, and they informed Shiro. Shiro banished his brother. Duke did not wasn't pleased with it, but he left, and then he started murdering the cats before eventually they broke in a fight where Duke basically challenged Shiro for his leadership. And the fight lasted for several days until their bodies were both exhausted, and by pure dumb luck, Duke managed to kill Shiro, but only because he had been abusing his ability and extending his life force, killing others. And then what isn't what gets stated that is not well known is Shiro did not get absorbed. No, Shiro's just a ghost nobody can see, and he can't interact with any other spirit, and he can just see Duke's victims. He can try to warn them, but there's nothing he can do to warn them. They don't see him, they don't hear him. He's just there. And eventually, at some point, cats got fed up with Duke's dictatorship and what he was doing to their kingdom, and they killed him. But Duke had heirs, and he revived through possessing one of the young kittens that was one of his bloodline. And the cycle repeated over and over and over till we get to the era of corruption, which I won't, at least I'm going to label era of corruption. This is where Izzy comes into play, Ryan comes into play, Talon becomes into play. I forget what I renamed what was once Goliath. I think I renamed him Behemoth. Behemoth came into play. Talon's parents and aunt, I guess. Very importantly, Izzy and Reed. Suddenly, Duke, who is a guardian technically speaking, was not the only guardian. And this is very uncommon. Like, the only type of guardian that is seen as common is healing, because healing one is unnatural. Because healing is unnatural, technically speaking. Because, well, it's something that naturally happens, someone else causing it to heal rapidly, that is unnatural. And basically, what happened was Reed is a guardian, Izzy's a guardian, Ryan's a guardian because her ability is healing. Talon is not a guardian, but of someone of a powerful bloodline. Technically speaking, Talon's sister, whose name I don't recall, I think it was Maple, and I'm scratching that because then we'll have two Maples, and that might get confusing when we have Ripple's sister, who is going to be a main character, by the way. So that might be a bit too confusing if I keep it as that. So Talon's sister's name is gonna change to what I don't know. I'll figure it out when I'm designing her reference sheet. It's gonna happen after I get through the current cluster of cats, because I can only distract myself with semi-present day characters for so long. But we get this playing field where there's a bunch of cats with unnatural powers, and Duke is picking a fight with Talon's family and even forced himself on the matriarch's sister. And then what happens is Behemoth, upon getting his bloodline cursed by Duke, curses Duke's family, in response to destroy the bloodline. So he can't have kids anymore. He's suddenly forced to be infertile. All the kittens he's produced, forcefully and unforced, and through somehow convincing somebody willingly to do it, all of them die within days of that curse being afflicted. So suddenly Duke no longer has the meats. Hello? Who is interrupting me? Suddenly Duke had no way to revive through his kin, which is, fun fact, the easiest way to revive through, through possessing one's kin. Quick note that I have not mentioned thus far. Duke did more than just possess them, because once he took over the body and they split, instead of letting that cat continue to exist, he killed them to add to his life force. Once again, continuing his problem of adding to his life force and kind of being immortal, but 100% not how immortality works in this world. So this leads to the point where Duke is fighting to add to his life and trying to find a way to become immortal. This is where really Izzy comes into play, our grayscale Molly of the hour, because there were rumors during the age he came from that, from rogues of course, that a way to gain immortality would be to kill another guardian and steal their life force. But healers, you can't absorb a healer's soul to gain immortality. Oh my god, I can't eyes. So Izzy's sister Ryan would be useless to kill for the sense of gaining immortality, but she already had a negative place against her because she's albino, and this is after Duke's initial reign. Eyes became very important for eye color because they acknowledged the redness around his eyes when they changed, because a further stage of his possession stage, which I've shown for Shadow Knight drawings, I might actually bring that up. Where did I throw that? I think it's actually in Hypokits. Funny enough. I have all the correct files up without meaning to, because I was thinking about working on other stuff. Here we are. Shadow Duke. As you see, as you don't see, because I don't show it here, basically how Duke's eye thing worked was he got the heterochroma here, then it turned to his pupils, and then it changed and mutated to be his actual eye color, and then his ability color, which is green, a toxic bright green, became the pupil. So his eyes mutated as time went on, but change of eye colors is the easiest way to spot possession. And since cats were already thinking color red and pink are bad because of Duke, those with albinism were treated unfairly and often targeted or killed. And the only reason why Ryan has lived that long is because, one, her ability is healing. She can heal herself to extent at a faster rate due to it. She can't force heal herself fast, but she can at least speed up the process, just making her making her sleep more and become more hungry as a result, because it takes energy to heal. So she could speed up the process, it's just not as effective as it would be to heal someone else, is what I'm saying for her ability. Quick note about Talon's sister, same thing, except she probably was better at healing because cats went to her willingly. Meanwhile, Ryan was more used to having to heal herself because of being a target. But the thing is, Izzy, our grayscale lady, whose eyes would change to what I have labeled for Twisted Shadows and Visionaries. I'm trying to think if I have any good drawings of that. I don't think I do. And I don't know if I actually showed that in her newest reference sheets. I don't think I did. I don't know if I did her most recent reference sheet. Random fun fact, because I'm going to get sidetracked anyways. This is also known as a visionary mark, even though, technically speaking, Talon got it too. Quick fun fact, the sun rings do represent the Visionary and Twisted Shadow power, white is Twisted Shadows, which is ironic in the sense of Twisted Shadows are not supposed to have white on their shadow form. There's like one character, technically speaking, it's a pair that has a color defect because of the merging, which is why there's white. Cough, cough, to corporate desires. And then black is Visionary. But basically, Izzy became a primary target because Reed wanders around, and every time he got hurt, he would manage to be able to slip away and somehow find his way to Talon's family and be able to get healed. Another thing that made Reed a threat to Duke, on a quick side note, and why Duke did target him, was because Reed's ability afflicts the soul. He can compel souls to ascend, descend, or even act upon emotions that have been robbed from them because spirits, their emotions are very muted once they pass. And that left it so that Reed became a threat because he could just tell his spirit to ascend instead of being stolen by Duke's power. They would play a tug of war on the soul, and Reed would usually win the tug of war. Sometimes the spirit would get broken per se, and the spirit was not grabbed, but it would end up in a similar state as Shiro. But those souls, if they would eventually either find a way to ascend and rejoin their families, or they would try possessing to break free, or they would just simply fade away out of obscurity. But there wasn't that many cats that happened for that to happen. It's really just that more so happened when Reed eventually died, and Duke's soul was trying to still grab cats, even though he couldn't revive just yet, because he'd find a body, a host to revive through. I'm getting sidetracked in this conversation. I'm skipping things, but he decided Izzy would be the easier target to kill, but Izzy had a reputation of being extremely dangerous. And then there became the opportunity. Basically, Izzy became pregnant with Talon's kids. They were very excited and happy for it. It's just Izzy's kids started to come sooner than expected, and Duke somehow was able to pick up on that. And he murdered Talon's sister right before going for Izzy while Talon was looking for his sister. Because his sister is a well-known healer and has helped multiple cats, and Izzy's kits were coming far too soon. So he went to get his sister, found her dead with Duke's stench all around. He goes back to the river where he sees an injured Ryan trying to defend her sister and Reed and Duke duking it out. And Reed temporarily gets downed, but Talon interferes as he realizes something. Not when he doesn't interfere. I'm remembering the storyline a bit wrong. Okay, bear with me. I'm trying. How do I say this? Talon gets there too late. He gets there right after Reed gets down. He sees Reed trying to get back up, and Izzy dead, and Ryan defending his kids. I'm remembering the events a bit wrong because it's been a while since I wrote the whole backstory thing. And some of this might be up to changing. Some of it might be refined. I don't know. It's gonna be probably at least a month at most before I start writing Tales of Rhazie. So probably around a year before it starts getting posted, which is literally October. It'll probably be finally me writing it again. And Talon shifts into a Twisted Shadow and manages to kill Duke and kill himself on the right. And this is where we find out Izzy's power being infused to her mate and sister gave them immortality. Because what happened was Reed shoved Izzy's soul into the ground, but because she was a guardian and he's never touched a guardian soul, he had to try to deal with her power, and it fractured and split. It inflicted the entire world of Rhazie. And Talon and Ryan are the first Twisted Shadows and Visionaries. And Izzy became a tree. I'm very tempted to see if I can commission someone to design Izzy's tree. Or I'll learn how to draw trees eventually. Because the thing is, her tree has like nothing on it. Like, it's just dead, basically. It's a dead whitish gray tree. But that's where that timeline basically ends with Talon reviving and finding out the immortality. Because basically, how immortality works in my world is you can die, technically speaking, but you're unaging, for one, and two, dying simply doesn't end you. You will come back to life, whether it be seconds or days. The time length varies, especially depending on what your cause of injuries that killed you were. For say, if someone fell off a cliff and hit their head, you probably would arrive faster than someone with multiple gaping wounds. If someone was torn from limb for limb, well, they'll eventually regenerate, but that would probably take the longest time. With those limbs that are being regrown, the parts that are missing and not connected to the head would just disintegrate faster as they get reconstructed. Which is pretty graphic, and I probably won't ever do that to a character. There is another system, which is the revival system. It works a couple ways. You could just simply be reincarnated. You could be force yourself into reincarnation by willing your soul to be reincarnated. And then there's possession, taking over one's body. Depending on how the possession goes, the other cat's soul might be there. You might have to slowly break away at their soul and make them break everything they hold as a moral compass to pieces. And then you are able to take over. So that's where Duke is actually now. He's in a state where he's just like, I need a body. I don't know what the fuck I'm drawing, but it looks kind of cool. But the head looks weird. Body part looks fine. But basically, Duke is looking for a fitting soul. And then he found Shattered Knight. We'll go back to that. The error after this is cats started forgetting they had abilities. Magic powers? What's that? Sure, a cat with abilities that are elemental would appear from time to time. The healers also would appear from time to time. But now we're getting springs of twisted shadows, aka cats with a form that's shadowy or grayscaled with eyes that are red to pink, occasionally purple tinted if they have a color defect. And white was never an option. The lightest you could go is silver. And also, quick note about color defects. Usually, if they have a color defect and their eye is purplish, their fur might also gain a purple tint. They might also not even have their paws stained with blood. Quick note about Twisted Shadows is how I deal with it is Twisted Shadows' paws are marked with the bloods they may kill, and their tears are the blood of those they may lose. That's how I deal with it. Basically, red and blue is love and hatred, joy and sorrow. That's how I see it for the red and blue thing. So neither is inherently bad. It just happens to be more Twisted Shadows because they're the more commonly appearing one, tend to be evil or doing terrible things. Some of it is because society is already judging them negatively. Some of it is the society they're born into is already negative, and some of it is they're just an asshole. As for visionaries, they're usually seen with prestige and are like seen like an angel or something heavenly or divine, something that's like blessed. And their words can and will be taken as gospel, even if they shouldn't be taken as gospel. Some visionaries are evil and have taken advantage of the extra authority that's given to them just because they can claim they saw something, and then they're like, yeah, I saw this, we should do this, and use it to manipulate cats to gain power. Some cats are like that. And then there's Tansy, who saw visions of Duke, especially Duke possessing talent, not talent, possessing Shattered Knight, and decided all Twisted Shadows are bad and should be massacred. which is terrible. Like, after she died, she realized her mistake, especially when watching what her son became to be, who she basically didn't raise beyond nursing, because she was paranoid about Shadow Knight killing her son because she caused all his kids to get murdered after murdering his mate. So there's the whole beef there. Spoilers for Shattering the Night, and I guess kind of for Corrupted Desires or Blood-Soaked Visions. But we enter a period where cats no longer know they have abilities. The dogs, the blessed dogs. Some dogs got greedy and were like, we want an area of all our own where we don't have to deal with cats. And they took advantage that the epicenter of where Izzy's power was, the Rhazie crater, that's where the cats mostly definitely did not know about the meteor. And if they did, they have long forgotten it. So they're just like, you know what, let's take over here. And that started a whole fight with cats versus dogs. And eventually, what happened was someone foresaw that a Molly named Angel would help drive out the dogs. And the dogs became fearful because they heard rumors of that whisper. And it didn't end out how it was meant to. The dogs eventually did get driven back, but it wasn't by Angel. It was by her daughter, Minnow. But before we get into Minnow, let's get into her mate, Tiger, who I don't think I have a current design for. If I do, I don't remember what it looks like. It's probably fluffy. Tiger was born to a litter of at least two. If he had more siblings, they likely were killed. His sister was Luna, the founder of the Grand Flower Meadow. Not the Grand Flower Meadow, that's Reed. Unofficially, Reed was the first one to create the groups of power. Unofficially, because Grand Flower Meadow was a group long before they even became the groups of power. But Tiger wanted a society where the cats were grouped together to defend each other and look after each other, instead of just fighting over each other in petty fights, grudges, and then for the dogs to swoop in and finish off the quote-unquote victor. And backstory time, at one point I believe his backstory was that his parents got killed by the dogs after fending off some random asshole that attacked him and his sister. And that shook him to the core. And he slowly, as time went on, started trying to get word out to get that idea out. And Luna also emphasized on that too. And then they met Alice. They met Slade, the founder of the Shadow Forest, not Slade, the antagonist. Granted, this Slade's slightly antagonistic. And to their surprise, cats were starting to agree with the idea of, hey, let's group up. Living in a group might be safer. I would like a safe place to raise my kids. And it just grew. And the biggest opposition was the cursed Tom. Will I ever give him an official name? Who knows? Does his mate get an official name? No. She's just simply nameless. But she gets many nicknames: the Vengeful Mother, the one who can bless, the one who. But she's more known for her cursing, so the blessed part might be just a very small few. But so they create the groups of power with that main spot being opposition, with Tiger becoming mates with Angel and taking in her sister Alicia, while his sister moves into a mountain that was planned by Salus's family, which is her mate, who was a healer. He was a healer. He's actually, fun fact, the only healer in the area that knows the abortion drug. And how they met was because of that. Because some rando rogue forced himself on Luna, and she was very miserable about being pregnant and not wanting to raise the kids of some stranger that she didn't even know, who literally ran off as soon as he was done with her. I mean, partly because Tiger came running, and Tiger is big. And he's one of the larger bloodlines of cats, but the largest bloodline of cats actually still belongs to Behemoth, Bear, Ava. Ava's descendant, which is eventually Fife, and the second largest bloodline, I believe, is a rogue who needs a name, followed by Shadow Knight and all his kits. And then it would be singularly just Wasp from the bloodline that we'll maybe eventually get into. And then the Lavender faction, followed by Slade's bloodline, which is the bloodline of the Cursed Tom and the Vengeful Mother. And then from there, heights vary from families to family, with one of the not well tracked bloodlines that I have, because I didn't go far back into their backstory, would be Galen, and then his descendants, which is Dustin, Maple. Ripple became average because Silver, while large, her family's not guaranteed to be large because some of her siblings were average. So, not large. They're just not large. But Dustin's kids, for the most part, are large. Just Ripple got the short end of the stick. He's average. But, as I was saying, Luna's mate was the only one who knew the abortion drug. And the only one who got taught the abortion drug was their son, who I'm not looking up the name of the second because I don't want to get into family tree shit too much. But the Cursed Tom was manipulating and murdering cats still, and eventually chaos broke out on that end. But the other end of the spectrum is River Valley, the group Tiger founded. It was the largest group when it was created. And then cats started to think Angel totally manipulated Tiger and got herself pregnant with his kids to definitely get him on a leash and influence her level of power. After all, she even has her sister who's a healer. It's totally a manipulation, also, and that caused the group to break out into a fight and end up driving away most of the group, or at least half the group, along with Angel and two of her daughters. Her daughter Minnow, though, was with her father, Tiger, who was visiting his sister because Alicia was having trouble figuring out why Minnow was having such bad headaches and stuff. And eventually they figured out, oh, she's a visionary and she's getting visions at a very young age and it's affecting her negatively currently. So they patch her up with that and stuff. And then they go back to find most group's gone, Tiger's mate is gone, two of his daughters are gone, and it just broke him on so many levels. He waited for her to come back. He tried to figure out where she went to get her back and could not. And then eventually he got into a fight with a fox on the territory, potentially defending a group mate, and his condition significantly dropped to the point where he just eventually died. Like he had just given up. Like sure, he cared about Minnow and his sister, but his sister was far away, and he named Minnow as his heir. The group did not appreciate Minnow. Minnow, the young child herself, was forced into power way too young, and she felt bitter for the fact that she will never see her mother again, or her sisters, and her father died of heartbreak. And so what Minnow did was she made a rule that only her descendants can be a leader. Temporary leadership may be under Alicia's descendants, because Alicia also had kids of her own. And the group was not happy about that. They were even less happy when Minnow brought in a Twisted Shadow claiming he was her mate. He is. His name was Vincent. He's very nice. He definitely was more head over heels for Minnow than Minnow was for him. Also, that's the last time we see a visionary or Twisted Shadow in that bloodline, is those two. Their kids were normal, and everything after that is normal, up till Gale, who was a guardian. He had the elemental power of wind. Slightly over storms, but wind. But, continuing on, Tiger's death devastated Minnow, but she endured and became bitter toward her own group a bit. Hence why Minnow Law exists, and why she took Twisted Shadow as a mate. She did like him. It's just she was more so using the fact she's a Twisted Shadow to piss off her group and make it harder for them to challenge her because they fear Twisted Shadows more than they fear visionaries. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have Slade the founder, who's still upping his beef with the Cursed Tom, and Luna, who was heartbroken over her brother's death, and Alice. Quick note, they did curse the Cursed Tom and his descendants to reflect his true colors. Unfortunately, when they said to reflect his true colors, it caused the side effect of all of them to become evil outside of naturally born Twisted Shadows and Visionaries. And because cats have a stigma against Twisted Shadows, and they, the Slade the Founder most definitely was visualizing a Twisted Shadow and thinking of an evil spirit, it forced the kids to be unnaturally turned into Twisted Shadows, which meant every shift was painful for them, and beyond that, they were losing their mind to a bloodlust, which pissed off the vengeful mother. At first, she didn't do much, but eventually, the cursed Tom got into her head, and she went and killed Luna, who was pregnant, who she didn't realize was pregnant until after she killed her, and Salas. What the legends claim from the history of the cats, they claim that she killed also Luna's sons, which is not true. The cursed Tom killed one of her sons. The group members who were being homophobic killed another of Luna's sons. And the third one died of infection and wounds due to injuries given to him by the vengeful mother and the fact he wasn't properly taking care of himself. And the fact that he had no healer and he to 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 heal his wounds, and he didn't want to go bother River Valley, who he's close with, but he was also pissed because he probably figured that it's also Slade, the Founder's fault that his parents got killed. His younger sister Aurora ran away from home, and eventually will be the bloodline that only remained of Luna, and her kids will eventually, not her kids, her descendants eventually would make themselves back to the group and unintentionally lust for power because, quick random note, all of the descendants of the founders wish to be in a position of power, whether it be a healer or leadership. But it's unintentional. They just feel the pull for it. Long as there's one, the bloodline pull feels satisfied. An example of this is Anik becoming a healer made it so that her descendants and the other end of the spectrum, which would be Shadow Knight's family, they didn't feel the pull. Continuing on, quick note, the vengeful mother had two litters, or more, potentially. But if she had more than that, the older ones are definitely dead. Her second litter, that is tracked and known, she had a single daughter. And she had left her alone when she went to go deal with killing Luna and all that. And when she got back, when she got back to where she left her daughter, she found her mate who she had actually walked away from there with one of Alice's kits, because Alice had multiple litters, and he was dead. And he claimed he found that random son of Alice over the corpse of their daughter. Enraged by this, the vengeful mother went to go kill Alice and Alice's kits. She got into a fight with Alice. Alice tried to talk her down so she'd understand what was going on. That did not happen, and they ended up fighting and rolling off a cliff edge. While the vengeful mother just plummeted to her death, Alice hit a ledge because Cliff Valley has ledges. Let's be accurate here. River is right here. Shoreline right there. Cliff edge right here. Occasional ledge. Alice landed on one of these ledges and it hurt her bad injury. She probably would have lived if she wasn't pregnant and if her body had miscarried, legit aborted the kitten she was expecting, because her body couldn't handle much more damage, and childbirth, aka kittings, are not always the safest thing, and they're painful. They cause, technically speaking, in a sense, damage. They put the cat into a lot of pain. So Alice died giving birth to a litter. The fucked up part is, so as I mentioned, Salas and his son were the only two that knew the abortion herb. Elisa had a chance to learn it, but she figured it wasn't important for her to learn it because it doesn't grow in marshy areas or river plains or whatnot. It only grows around cliffs and in caves. So, which means it only could be found at Cliff Valley and Cliff of Thy Dawn, the two different cliffs. The fucked part was Alice's mate turned Salus away when he was offering it, to Alice's brother, who was a healer. So, Alice could have been saved if her mate hadn't turned that away. So that ultimately caused Alice to die. But yeah, so that ends roughly the founding area, and then we get the weird in between area, which is Shattering the Night, where Twisted Shadows are being discriminated and the factions somewhat a pain, but are getting a line drawn so they don't cross territory by Cliff Valley. Second draft, Cliff Valley despises Twisted Shadows after events of Corrupted Desires. Third draft, there's a stigma against them, but they're not outright hated as long as we don't hide the fact they have shifted. The only group who will outright turn against any Twisted Shadows, and they're lucky if they just get banished when shifting, is River Valley. They just outright hate them due to something factions did and a bit of what Shadow Knight did. And then the following era is Gale. Gale, I'm not going to get into it as much with Gale's era because it's not extremely important to the timeline. It's going to be in the book potentially for Tainted Sunrise, maybe. I don't know for certain. It's more important to when I actually have River as a main character, and she's a second series main character when we're actually dealing with the dogs, because they come back eventually. But yeah, so Gale's little era is there was a drought. Gale kills his aunt, avenging his mother, and voila, there's rain again. That's the mini arc of Gale, but he's a guardian. I'm not gonna, as I said, I'm not gonna get into that because that's not majorly plot relevant. The only plot relevance it does is there's a hidden law that gets added to Middle's Law where it allows temporary leadership of someone else when someone in the bloodline is a tyrant. Quick note about Middle's Law, like why does no one fight it? Cats have tried replacing Minnow's bloodline. As I've already stated, Minnow's Law, it has to be her descendant. Gale's Law adds hidden clause for temporary leadership that is not of the bloodline. But, quick note, there has been cats who occasionally have taken over into the bloodline, not part of the bloodline, that have taken leadership. If they plan to be like permanent leadership, they always end up with an unfortunate demise of being dead. If it's ever a cat that's like just temporary holding leadership or claim they were gonna hold the leadership, but they all intend to put it back under Minnow's bloodline, nothing ever happens to them. Hence why we have the dynasties that we do. I think that's about it for that little arc. And then we skip in time towards the future of where the main series hits, where I've actually written the one-shots for most of it for. I'm not going to delve too much into this, at least not too deeply. River Valley and Cliff Valley, quick side note, have a beef around the time Rain is leadership. Rain becomes leader and Falcon becomes leader because when Rain was about to become leader, when she was still vice and just trying to get some herbs to help we save her mother and several other roommates who were sick with something that Cliff Valley had the herbs for, but Ravelli didn't. He may or may not have forced himself on her when Annick said, "Yeah, these herbs are free of no cost," and he's like, "No, there is a cost." And then she ended up pregnant with kids, which in a way did solve the fact that because she had no heirs, because Rain is canonly ace, not really interested in having kids either. She had two sons with Falcon, technically speaking, Shrew and Dusty. Falcon would later try to claim them, all three of them, for himself. regardless of the fact that he already had a mate and has a current mate, Jewel, by that point, or at least by the ending of that point. And their fight never fully gets resolved, mainly because Shadow Forest exists, and it's between them, and Falcon was like, taking advantage of the other thing that had happened, which is Kabuto. Kabuto is a rogue who went around killing strays, and then eventually got bold enough and attacked the Shadow Forest. He killed off majority of the group. All the elders were killed. Most of the youngsters were killed. Like, they had to be young adult and above, outside of Alfred and two Mollys that happened to be young. One was just both of them on the cusp of adulthood, or a couple moons shy of adulthood. Majority of the queens were killed. If they weren't killed, that means their kids were killed. And Kabuto became obsessed with Alia, who, in the turmoil of all of the murder and death, was just trying to make her son quiet. Poor little Alfred. Like 3 days old. Everything is wrong around him. There's too much murder. And I'm not going to get too much into this because I literally wrote the one shots earlier this year. So I don't feel like getting into them too much. But basically, we go through mute traumas rewrite where I get in more depth with it of what happened and change a couple things. Like, I talk about how Alia is isolated from her group mates because her mate was a stray that they claim was a rogue, but he really was a stray who came to them dying, telling them, hey, Kabuto is going to murder us all if you don't do something. They ignored him. He wasn't the only stray who said it, too. And Shadow Forest is actually a bit weird in the sense of they have trouble holding large populations. Something bad always happens when they have a big population and it shrinks. So we get mute trauma where little Alfred's in the center of it all. Actually, it's not even Alfred at that point, it's just Alia. And she's trying to just exist and not be touched by him, but he's also clearly favoring her, and eventually he does force himself on her after she avoided it through having Allie. And he killed Allie's littermates, who were her brothers, from the second stray. And Alia doesn't know this herself, but Allie's father was the last stray victim before Kabuto killed the group because she had Alfred and then immediately got knocked up, pretty much, right after, by just another ranch. Because, quick note about Shadow Forest, which I just circled back to because I was starting to ramp away from it. Shadow Forest, they are only welcoming to strays for the most part that want to join the group or will join the group. If a kitten gets sired that's not part of the group, or at least has a father that's not part of the group, it's seen as a rogue took advantage of the Molly, whether or not the fact that whether or not it was consensual or whatnot. And Kabuto's reign led to Jack, the healer mate, gaining power and being able to do what he wanted. Because, quick fun fact, the healer did not want kids. Her mate wanted kids, but she did not. And she ended up having kids out of fear of being forced upon, and never could escape the cycle after that. And Kabuto eventually leaves the group after murdering Alia for killing his kids that he forced her to have, but not before she also cursed him that if anything happened to her kids, that something bad will happen. So he became uncertain of how to handle Allie and Alfred. And Alfred also became mute because of his mother's death, because the trauma was just too much for him, and he lost his voice that day. Is how I've played it. It's a traumatic event. That's why he can't speak. Meanwhile, Allie's growing up somewhat conflicted and confused about how to feel about her mother, because her mother, technically speaking, did murder newborn kittens that had done nothing wrong, and in the turmoil of all the groups. So she feels bitterment to her mother, but she also knows that Kabuto was not a good cat. Basically, that's the events of Mu Trauma, and then it leads into the fall of the Grand Meadow, which the Visionaries did not see coming, and the one who did still ends up dead. And the two cats that were at the time normal, the two cats at the time that were normal were spared, and they happened to be Molly's. One chose to end her life because she did not want to bear the kits of the one who destroyed everything and took her freedom. The other one, Ginger, because Ginger is named, her sister is not, decided to bear the kits out of spite, and then died due to birth complications. And then a random stray got picked up. Her kits got murdered, and then she was forced to nurse Flora and Slade, GM, aka the antagonist. And then she was murdered promptly after she was done nursing them because he didn't, Kabuto, as in he, did not need her. And he killed Flora eventually. I'm not specifying why he killed her because that gets spoken in the written text of why he did it. And then he abusively trained Slade, and then upon taking Slade to the Shadow Force, Slade killed him and made Jack his vice. And then from there, we get a turf war between Cliff Valley and the Shadow Force because they both hear of this random stray named Claire who's interested in healing. And what happened was Cliff Valley found her first, but due to one of the fighters knocking up the one Molly they brought with them who was mute, so they couldn't be as easily discovered that they were planning to forcefully take Claire, her brother, to potentially her mother, by force to join the group. So they couldn't properly do it because that cat was pregnant. So they leave to go get back up so they can drag her back, only to find she's gone. And there's news that her parents, at the very least, were dead. And there's reports they've seen Mink very heavily injured. Not a word about Claire, but she's potentially dead as well. In reality, it was Slade found them, killed her parents, brought her brother to the brink of death, and took her with him, Claire with him. And then he went to Clydon to make sure she was getting some extra training to finish up her healing training till she was almost done. But she was pregnant with his first litter. And it became increasingly clearer as time went on that the group was getting somewhat suspicious of him, or at least those in power, but it wasn't enough. So he ends up killing Ace because Claire quote unquote behaved and was begging him to spare Shadow. He spared her in his cruel way. And then that's the events of that. And he took her to the shore forest. She gave birth on the territory, giving birth to a bunch of stillborns. Two stillborns to be exact, because she's maximum 4 litter. Every time she'll have 4 kids. Whether they're stillborn or not is a different story. And she has Goliath and Shard as her surviving kids. And has to accept the new role and the new life fully that she's not probably going to be able to escape. And her kids are going to be dragged into it too. Meanwhile, Shadow has to deal with the aftermath of what Slade did to her. And then we get to Mink. Mink survives somehow by pure luck of just barely hanging on. And Ash and Todd, Luna's descendants, finding him. At first, they try to figure out where he went, go the wrong direction first time because they went towards the Grand Meadow. And then they went to Cliff Valley. Not Cliff Valley, Cliff of Thy Dawn. Upon realize, as they slowly dawned onto Mink what happened to him. And upon getting to Cliff of Thy Dawn and realizing everything that happened, they realize that they have a good theory about where he went, which is the Shadow Forest, and it slowly dawned on them that the likelihood of getting Claire back was going to be too difficult due to what the visionaries were saying and what they knew about fighting. So they chose against going after Claire, and upon staying there and all that, the 3 Toms, the 3 amigos, fell in love. Mink fell in love with a currently nameless Molly, who would bear him at least, I think, 2 litters is I think what he has, is about 2 litters. And then Ash fell in love with Misty, as the main plot states. I'm still refiguring out what that's going to look like in the long run, because Misty's betrayal in the long run does not fully make sense. And then we have Todd. Todd fell in love with Todd fell in love with Shay, Shadow's daughter. And that's pretty much the history of it. And then on a winter night, Claire gave birth to her second litter at the Grandflower Meadow. One of the kids was murdered, and the other gets abandoned moons later, and that's where basically Black Dawn gets started. There is two routes I'm potentially playing with. One route is in order for Shattered Knight to be a healer under Anik, that Anik reveals to Falcon that Claire is alive and has had litters with Slade, and Slade ends up giving him Stone, the only kitten of the second litter that is alive, that did not run off or get abandoned, because one kitten that's nameless was murdered. The other one, Hawk, ran away, and Hazel, as the first draft has stated multiple times, was abandoned. So he gives Stone to the Shadow Force, not Shadow Force. The Shadow Force gives up some of their youngsters and Stone to Cliff Valley, and they start a trading thing where they're trading some members and bloodlines, and potentially it'll eventually combine into being a massive threat. I don't know how that's going to play out, because it also results in the other groups just trying to mass numbers in hopes of dealing with the potential threat, but that's not immediately thought of. There's another route where things mostly turn out the same as the original book, except Ash lives longer, and I'm debating if Frost becomes Vice sooner and becomes leader sooner. There is also another deviation where I might have it so Stone, upon fleeing the Shadow Forest, in the chance that we follow the route where he was not given away and Falcon had no clue, is that he gets captured by survivors of the Falkland Valley, and they hold him and his kits there, and we still get the same more or less route with toxicity growing in the group, and they're trying to grow, and things are more or less being forced. But that's all routes that I have to figure out as time goes on, and Black Dawn is now book 2, so some of that stuff is further out than I think it is. Like, some of the reference sheets I'm currently working on are actually stuff for book 2, but that's fine. And I think that's where we're going to end the timeline discussion, because that literally is basically the end of the planned out timeline. Some stuff might deviate, but book 1, Tainted Sunrise, is planned to go over most of it. I know for a fact Corrupted Desires is definitely going to be mostly skimmed. Some of Shattering the Night is definitely going to be there, because that's more plot relevant to the overarching story than Corrupted Desires. Like, the biggest thing about Corrupted Desires is Tansy, Steph, her son, and how it plays into the whole thing with the Eastern Rogues. And it's just one cycle of Shattered Knight's life. But I think that'll be it. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!